Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My family has this tradition where every Sunday we all pile into cars and head over to my grandmother's house for lunch. It's been going on for as long as I can remember. My parents, my aunt and uncle, all my cousins, sometimes even family friends would show up. The house would be packed with people talking, laughing, and arguing over football games on TV. My grandmother took these Sunday lunches seriously. She'd wake up at 6 in the morning to start cooking. By the time we arrived around noon, the whole house smelled incredible. She'd make pot roast that fell apart when you looked at it, collard greens with ham hocks, spicy gumbo that could wake the dead, cornbread that was crispy on the outside and fluffy inside, and whatever else struck her fancy that week. But here's the thing about my grandmother. She knew her audience. She had about 6 grandkids ranging from age 5 to 13, and most of the younger ones were picky eaters. So alongside all the grown-up food, she'd make what she called kid food. Usually mac and cheese from the box, chicken tenders, or grilled cheese sandwiches. Nothing too fancy, nothing too spicy, nothing that would make the little ones cry. I was the oldest of all the grandkids, and for years I was perfectly happy with the kid food. The mac and cheese was good, the chicken tenders were crispy, and I didn't have to worry about accidentally biting into something that would set my mouth on fire. But when you're 13, you start getting ideas about yourself. You start thinking you're more mature than you actually are. You want to be treated like an adult, even when you're not ready for adult responsibilities. That's exactly what happened to me on this particular Sunday. We were all sitting around the big dining table, adults on one side with their plates full of serious food, kids on the other side with our simple meals. I looked over at my dad's plate loaded with that dark, rich gumbo and those glossy collard greens, and suddenly my chicken tenders seemed babyish. Without really thinking it through, I pushed my plate away from me with both hands, making sure everyone could see my dramatic gesture. I announced loudly that I didn't want kid food anymore, and demanded to eat what the grown-ups were eating. The whole table went quiet. My younger cousins stared at me like I'd lost my mind. My parents looked concerned. My aunt raised an eyebrow, but my grandmother just sat there, looking at me over her glasses with this long, slow stare that made me feel like she was reading my soul. My grandmother asked me if I was sure about that, calling me sugar in that way she always did. I nodded so hard I probably looked like one of those bobblehead dolls. In my 13-year-old brain, this was my moment to prove I was mature and ready for the adult world. I told her that I was too old for kid food. My grandmother didn't argue with me. She didn't try to talk me out of it or warn me about what I was getting into. She just stood up, walked over to the stove, and started preparing my plate. First, she ladled out a huge portion of her gumbo. Not a small taste, but a full adult serving. The stuff was so dark it was almost black, with chunks of sausage and chicken floating in it. I could smell the spices from across the room. Then she added a generous scoop of collard greens. These weren't just any collard greens, they were cooked with vinegar and had been simmering for hours. They looked intimidating on the plate. She added a piece of cornbread on the side and filled up a big glass with unsweetened iced tea. No sugar, no sweetener, just straight tea. When she set that plate in front of me, I knew I had made a mistake. But there was no backing down now. Everyone was watching me, waiting to see if I could handle it. I picked up my spoon and took my first bite of the gumbo. Holy hell! That stuff lit my entire mouth on fire. It was like someone had dumped liquid lava on my tongue. The spices hit me so hard that my eyes immediately started watering. My nose began running like a faucet. I could feel sweat starting to form on my forehead. But I couldn't give up, not with everyone watching. Not after making such a big deal about being too mature for kid food. I took another bite, then another. Each spoonful was torture. The heat built up in my mouth until I felt like I was breathing fire. I tried to cool it down with the iced tea, but that just made things worse because the tea was completely unsweetened and bitter. The collard greens weren't helping either. They were soaked in vinegar that made my already burning mouth pucker up. Every bite was a new kind of misery. My younger cousins had stopped eating their mac and cheese and were just staring at me. One of them was giggling behind her hand. My parents looked concerned but weren't saying anything. They knew this was between me and my grandmother. Meanwhile, my grandmother was eating her own food calmly, occasionally looking over at me with what I swear was amusement in her eyes. About halfway through the meal, she got up from her chair and walked over to me. She put her hand on my shoulder and leaned down to whisper something in my ear. She told me quietly that next week she'd fix me some chicken nuggets again, unless I'd rather keep eating like the adults. I wanted to cry with relief, but I was too proud to admit defeat right then and there. So I sat there for the rest of the meal, slowly working my way through that plate of fire while my mouth burned, and my pride kept me from asking for help. When we finally left that day, my mouth was still tingling from the spices. My parents didn't say anything about it on the drive home, but I caught them smiling at each other in the front seat. The next Sunday rolled around, and there I was, sitting at the same table. When my grandmother started serving food, she looked at me with a questioning expression. She asked me what it would be today, calling me sugar again, wondering if I wanted adult food or something else. I sheepishly asked if I could maybe have some chicken nuggets, please. She just smiled and went to fix my plate. Those chicken nuggets tasted like the best meal I'd ever had in my life. From that day on, I stuck to kid food until I was actually old enough to handle the real stuff. My grandmother never made me feel bad about it, and she never brought up my failed attempt at being grown up. She just let me learn my lesson the hard way. My entire livelihood depends on having a stable internet connection, so I invested in a premium internet package with unlimited data. It costs me a pretty penny each month, but it's essential for my work. I upload large design files, participate in video calls with clients, and need consistent connectivity throughout the day. My neighbor across the hall has always been a bit odd. She's the type who acts overly friendly when she needs something but completely ignores you otherwise. We've had maybe 5 conversations in the 3 years I've lived here, and most of them were her asking to borrow something or complaining about noise that wasn't even coming from my apartment. Last Tuesday started like any other day. I was working on a logo design for a client when I heard a knock on my door. I saved my work and went to answer it. Standing there was my neighbor, wearing a sparkly birthday tiara and a bright smile. I greeted her with a cheerful happy birthday when I opened the door. She thanked me but then explained that she needed to ask me for a favor. She told me that today was her birthday and she had a bunch of visitors coming over. She wondered if I would make my Wi-Fi public just for the day so they could use it. I just stared at her for a moment, trying to process what she was asking. She wanted me to remove the password protection from my internet connection and let random strangers use it for free. I asked her why I would do that. She explained that she had run out of all her data and didn't renew it. She said she had already spent heaps on food and decorations, so she couldn't really afford to top it up right now. The audacity was incredible. She had money for a party but couldn't budget for basic internet service, and somehow that was my problem to solve. I told her that I couldn't do that because my Wi-Fi was private for a reason. She rolled her eyes dramatically and her tone shifted from sweet to condescending. She said she thought I would be at least a little neighborly since it was her special day. She claimed I should let her make it more classic and that she would have declared free internet to all the guests. Then she just turned around and left without another word. I stood there for a moment, shaking my head at the interaction. Did she seriously think I would compromise my internet security because it was her birthday? I pay over $100 a month for that connection and I need it for work. Plus, making it public would slow down my speeds and potentially expose my devices to security risks. I went back to my computer and tried to focus on my work, but I kept thinking about how entitled she was. The more I thought about it, the more irritated I became. Who asks their neighbor to give away expensive services for free, especially someone they barely know? About 20 minutes later, there was another knock on my door. I already knew who it was before I opened it. She told me that she understood I didn't want to make it completely public. She asked what if she just gave the password to her 5 most special guests. She said it was just 5 people and asked if that wasn't too much to ask. Now she was trying to negotiate, as if the number of freeloaders was the issue. It wasn't about how many people would use it, it was about the fact that she expected me to provide a service I pay for to people I don't even know. I told her no and that I wasn't giving my Wi-Fi password to anyone. I asked her to leave. She asked if I was serious and said it was just internet. She called me selfish on her birthday. I repeated that I said no and asked her to leave my doorway. She said it was ridiculous and that she couldn't believe how rude I was being. She claimed all she asked for was a simple favor. I told her again that I said no and asked her to leave before I closed the door. She said fine but told me not to expect her to be friendly anymore. She called me the worst neighbor ever. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. Through the peephole I could see her standing there for a few more seconds, probably hoping I'd change my mind. Finally, she stomped back to her apartment. The rest of the day was actually pretty peaceful. I could hear her party starting up around 6 p.m., and I have to admit, I was curious about how she handled the Wi-Fi situation. Around 8 p.m., I heard raised voices from her apartment. It sounded like some of her guests were complaining about not being able to get online. The next morning, I was taking my trash out when I ran into another neighbor from upstairs. He asked if I had heard about the drama last night. I asked what drama he was talking about. He told me about my neighbor's birthday party turning into a disaster. He explained that apparently none of her guests could get online, so they couldn't post their photos or check their messages. Half the people left early because they were bored without their phones. She was running around asking everyone in the building for their Wi-Fi passwords. I asked if anyone gave it to her. She said I had to be kidding and that nobody wanted random strangers on their internet. She got pretty upset about it. He heard her telling someone on the phone that her birthday was ruined because of selfish neighbors. I smiled a little. She had brought this entirely on herself by not planning ahead and then expecting others to solve her problems. A few days later, I got a text from my property manager asking if I'd had any issues with noise complaints. Apparently, Karen had tried to file a complaint against me for disturbing the peace on her birthday. When the property manager asked for details, she couldn't provide any actual evidence of noise violations. Instead, she admitted she was angry that I wouldn't share my Wi-Fi password with her party guests. The property manager called me directly to apologize for bothering me and mentioned that frivolous complaints like that could actually result in problems for the person filing them. He also reminded all tenants in a building-wide email that internet service is a personal expense and that residents should not expect their neighbors to provide free access to their private networks. I never heard another word about it from Karen. She still lives across the hall, but now she completely ignores me when we pass in the hallway. Honestly, it's been much more peaceful that way. I work nights at a local warehouse, so I'm usually driving home around 6 a.m. when most people are just waking up. It's a quiet job that pays decent, and I've been doing it for about 3 years now. The route home takes me through a residential neighborhood where I've never had any problems before. I always drive carefully because I know kids walk to school in the morning, and I don't want to be that guy who causes accidents in a family area. This morning started like any other. I was tired from my shift, looking forward to getting home and sleeping until the afternoon. The sun was just starting to come up and the neighborhood was peaceful. I was driving down Maple Street at maybe 20 miles per hour, well under the 25 speed limit, when I saw her. There was this woman in her front yard, and she had what looked like a small fireworks launcher in her hands. I thought it was weird for someone to be playing with fireworks so early in the morning, but I figured maybe she was getting ready for some kind of celebration later. I slowed down even more just to be safe. That's when things went completely insane. She turned toward my car and actually aimed the thing at me. Before I could even process what was happening, she fired a firework directly at my windshield. The explosion was so close and so bright that I completely lost control of the car. My ears were ringing and I couldn't see anything for a few seconds. The next thing I knew, I had crashed straight into a fire hydrant. Water started spraying everywhere, and I was shaking from the shock. My car was damaged, steam was coming from the hood, and I had a cut on my forehead from hitting the steering wheel. I got out of the car still trying to figure out what just happened. The woman was walking toward me, and I expected her to apologize or ask if I was okay. Instead, she started yelling at me about how I had been speeding through the neighborhood like a maniac. She kept screaming that this was a family area and that I had no right to drive so recklessly. I told her that she had just shot fireworks at my car and that I crashed because of her attack. She immediately denied it and claimed she never shot anything at me. She insisted I was going way too fast and lost control on my own. She told me not to try to blame her for my reckless driving. This woman had literally just fired explosives at my moving vehicle, and now she was acting like I was the problem. My hands were still shaking when I pulled out my phone to call the police. I told her I was calling the cops because this was insane. She actually seemed happy about that and said, "Good, call them." She was confident that the police would see that I was speeding and causing a public hazard. While I was on the phone with the dispatcher, she kept ranting about how I was a dangerous driver and how people like me shouldn't be allowed on the road. She was being so loud that neighbors started coming out to see what was happening. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. There were two officers, and they started by asking what happened. I explained about the fireworks, but the woman immediately started talking over me. She told the officers that I had been speeding through their neighborhood and that I must have been going at least 40 miles per hour. She claimed I lost control and crashed into the hydrant and that she had been worried about reckless drivers like me for months. One of the officers told her to please let me finish explaining what happened. I told them that she shot fireworks at my car and that's why I crashed. I explained that I was driving normally when she aimed some kind of firework launcher at my windshield. The officer looked skeptical, probably because the story sounded so bizarre. The woman kept insisting that I was lying and that she had never touched any fireworks. She was getting more dramatic by the minute. She claimed this was typical behavior from someone who causes an accident and then tries to blame an innocent homeowner. She said she was just watering her plants when she heard the crash. That's when one of the neighbors who had been watching the whole thing stepped forward. He was an older man, probably in his 70s, and he looked pretty annoyed. He told the officers that he saw the whole thing from his kitchen window and that he had security cameras that recorded his front yard and the street. The woman's face went white when he said that. The neighbor explained that he could show them the footage right now if they wanted, because it clearly showed what actually happened. The woman immediately accused him of lying and claimed his cameras probably didn't even work. One of the officers said they would appreciate seeing that footage. We all walked over to the neighbor's house and he pulled up the video on his computer. The footage was crystal clear. You could see my car driving slowly down the street. Then you could see the woman in her yard with a firework launcher. The video showed her deliberately aiming at my car and firing. You could even see her laughing after the explosion and my crash. The officers watched the video twice and their whole attitude changed. They went back to the woman, who was now trying to come up with excuses. She claimed that the video was fake and that the neighbor probably edited it somehow. The officer explained that this was a live security system and that the timestamp showed this happened 15 minutes ago. She then tried to argue that even if she had fireworks, which she still denied, I should have been driving more carefully because I was still speeding. The officer shook his head and pulled out his handcuffs. He told her she was under arrest for reckless endangerment, filing a false police report, and destruction of property. She completely lost it at that point. She started screaming about how this was unfair and how she was just trying to protect her neighborhood. The officers had to physically restrain her while they put the handcuffs on. She kept yelling that this was ridiculous and that she was a taxpayer and they couldn't arrest her for protecting her property. The officer told her she had the right to remain silent and suggested she use it. When they were putting her in the police car, she was still yelling about how I was the real criminal and how the whole thing was a setup. The neighbor who had shown the video footage just shook his head and went back inside his house. The other officer took my statement and gave me a case number for the insurance claim. He said they'd probably charge her with additional crimes after they reviewed all the evidence. My car was totaled, but insurance covered it after they saw the police report. A few weeks later, I ran into the neighbor at the grocery store. He told me that the woman had been sentenced to 6 months in jail and had to pay for all the damage to my car and the fire hydrant. I'm a single mom of 3 kids, and my oldest daughter just turned 14. I work 2 jobs to make ends meet, so planning a birthday party is a big deal for us. We don't have much money, but I wanted to make her day special. Now, about my parents. They have been chronically late to everything for as long as I can remember. When I was a kid, we'd miss the first half of movies, arrive after church started, and show up to family gatherings when everyone was already eating dessert. It drove me crazy then, and it still drives me crazy now. About 3 years ago, my siblings and I started the system. We tell our parents that events start 1 hour before they actually do. It sounds crazy, but it's the only way to get them anywhere close to on time. For my son's last birthday party, we told them it started at 12 p.m. when it really started at 1 p.m. They showed up at 12:45 p.m., which for them was practically early. So when my daughter's birthday rolled around, I sent out invitations 2 months in advance. The party was planned for Saturday afternoon starting at 2 p.m. Every invitation said the same thing. Party starts at 2 p.m. Every invitation except the one I sent to my parents. Theirs said party starts at 1 p.m. I figured this would work perfectly. They'd show up around 1:30 p.m. or 1:45 p.m. and we'd start the party at 2 p.m. like planned. Everyone would be happy. A week before the party, I called them to remind them about it. I told them it started at 1 p.m. and asked if they'd be there on time. My mother assured me they would be there at 1 p.m. sharp. I could hear my father in the background saying they wouldn't be late this time. I actually laughed when I heard that. They say that every single time, and they're always late anyway. The night before the party, I called them again. I reminded them that the party started at 1 p.m. and that the kids were really excited to see them. My mother told me not to worry and promised they'd be there right at 1 p.m. My father said they were setting 3 alarms to make sure they were on time. Saturday morning came and I spent the entire morning preparing. I decorated the backyard, set up tables, prepared food, and got the cake ready. My daughter was bouncing around the house, excited about her friends coming over. At 1:15 p.m., the first guests started arriving. My daughter's friends from school showed up with their parents, and my siblings arrived with their kids. Everyone was having a great time, but I kept checking my phone and looking toward the front door. By 1:30 p.m., I was starting to worry. My parents still hadn't shown up, and they thought the party started at 1 p.m. I called them and asked where they were, reminding them that the party had already started. My mother said they were running a little late but would be there soon. I asked how soon was soon because people were already here. I could hear my father in the background telling her to say they were leaving right now. My mother repeated that they were leaving right now and would be there in 20 minutes. They live less than 10 miles away. It should take 15 minutes to get to my house, maybe 20 minutes with traffic. I hung up and tried to keep the party going. 2 p.m. came around and I made the decision to start serving food. The kids were getting hungry, and honestly, I was getting tired of waiting. We had hot dogs, hamburgers, chips, and all the usual party food. My daughter was happy, and that's what mattered most. My mother-in-law, who was helping me serve food, noticed I looked stressed. She asked if I was okay because I seemed worried about something. I told her my parents were supposed to be here at 1 p.m. and that they said they were leaving an hour ago. She reminded me that I knew how they were and pointed out that at least everyone else was having fun. She was right. The kids were playing games, the adults were chatting, and my daughter was opening presents. It was turning out to be a great party despite my parents' absence. 3 p.m. rolled around and I heard a car pull up in the driveway. Finally, my parents arrived 2 hours after they were supposed to be there, according to their invitation. They walked into the backyard like nothing was wrong, big smiles on their faces, and a wrapped present in my mother's hands. My mother apologized for being a little late and wished my daughter a happy birthday. My daughter hugged them, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She'd been asking about them for the past 2 hours. My father commented that it looked like a great party and asked if we were about to eat. I told them we had already eaten and started serving food an hour ago. My mother said that was okay and they could grab something later. Then came the part that really got under my skin. My father asked why we didn't wait for them since they had told us they were coming. I explained that we told them to be here at 1 p.m. It was 3 p.m. now, and we figured they weren't coming. My mother then said something that completely floored me. She explained that when an invitation says the party starts at a certain time, that just means that's when people should start arriving. It doesn't mean the actual event starts then. I stared at her for a moment, completely speechless. I told her I had no idea what she was talking about and that if an invitation says the party starts at 2 p.m., that means the party starts at 2 p.m. My father backed her up, saying that everyone knows you don't actually start right at the time on the invitation. He claimed that's just when people begin showing up. I told them that's not how it works. If I tell someone to be somewhere at a specific time, I expect them to be there at that time or at least close to it. My mother said I was being unreasonable and that they had never heard of anyone actually starting a party right at the time on the invitation. At this point, my sister walked over. She'd been listening to the conversation from a few feet away. She asked them if they were serious, pointing out that they showed up 2 hours late and were now blaming me for starting on time. My father said they weren't blaming anyone and were just saying that most people understand these things differently. My brother joined us, and I could see he was getting angry too. He told them they do this every single time. Always late was always an excuse. My mother got defensive and said they were not always late, they just had a different understanding of time. I told them I was done with this. I had told them the party started at 1 p.m. and they showed up at 3 p.m. They missed most of their granddaughter's birthday party because they couldn't be bothered to show up on time. My father looked confused and said I told them it started at 1 p.m., but the invitation said 2 p.m. And there it was, the moment I've been dreading. I took a deep breath and decided to come clean. I told them I had given them a different time because I know they're always late. The actual party started at 2 p.m., just like every other invitation said. My mother asked if I had lied to them. I explained that I didn't lie, I gave them a different time because they're never on time for anything. And even with that extra hour they were still late. My father said that was dishonest and that I can't just change the time on their invitation. My sister jumped in saying I wouldn't have to if they could show up on time like normal people. My brother added that we had been doing this for years because they can't figure out how to be punctual. My mother said that wasn't fair and that they try their best. I told them their best wasn't good enough. This was their granddaughter's birthday party, and they missed most of it because they couldn't be bothered to leave their house on time. My daughter, who had been listening to the whole conversation, walked over to us. She told me it was okay and that she had fun with everyone else. That broke my heart. My 14-year-old was being more mature about this than my parents. My father said to see she was fine and I was making a big deal out of nothing. I told them I thought they should leave. My mother seemed shocked and pointed out they had just gotten there. I said exactly, the party was almost over and they just got there. They had missed everything that mattered. My father said I was overreacting. I told them I wasn't overreacting. I was tired of them treating everyone else's time like it doesn't matter. I was tired of making excuses for them. And I was tired of my kids being disappointed because their grandparents can't show up when they say they will. My mother said fine, if that's how I felt, they would go. They left without even saying goodbye to my daughter properly. Just walked out the front door like they were the ones who had been wronged. The party continued for another hour and everyone had a great time. My daughter got to spend time with her friends and that's what really mattered. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, my daughter came to talk to me. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine and asked if she was disappointed that they missed most of her party. She said she was a little bit disappointed but that she was used to it. They're always late to everything. That conversation made me realize that my parents' behavior wasn't just affecting me anymore. It was affecting my kids too. They were learning that it's normal for people to be unreliable, and that's not a lesson I wanted them to learn. The next day, my mother called to apologize, but it was one of those non-apology apologies. She said she was sorry I got so upset yesterday and that they didn't mean to cause any problems. I told her she wasn't sorry for being late. She was sorry that I called her out on it. My mother said they had explained why they were late and that it wasn't their fault that I misunderstood how party invitations work. I reminded her that she was the only one who showed up 2 hours late. Everyone else understood exactly what time the party started. My mother said that maybe next time I should be clearer about my expectations. I hung up on her. I was done having this conversation. It's been a month since the party, and I haven't heard from my parents since that phone call. Part of me feels bad about how things ended, but a bigger part of me is relieved. I'm tired of planning my life around their inability to show up on time. My daughter seems fine with everything. She's moved on and is already planning what she wants to do for her 15th birthday. I just hope that when the time comes, I won't have to choose between including my parents and having a party that starts on time. I work 2 jobs to make ends meet, mornings at a coffee shop and evenings at a call center. Between the long hours in my tiny apartment, I barely have time to keep up with basic life stuff. That's why I do my grocery shopping once a week, usually on Sunday mornings before my afternoon shift. I plan everything out, make lists, and buy in bulk when things are on sale. It's the only way I can stretch my budget and avoid multiple trips to the store. This Sunday was special though. My sister was visiting from out of town for the first time in 2 years, and I wanted to throw her a small welcome party. Nothing fancy, just some snacks, drinks, and a few decorations. I've been looking forward to it all week. I got to the grocery store early, around 8 a.m. when it's usually pretty quiet. I grabbed one of the larger shopping carts and started working through my list. First stop was the bulk section for rice, pasta, and cereal, stuff that would last me weeks. Then I hit the party supplies aisle for streamers, paper plates, and napkins, the frozen section for some appetizers, the produce section for fruits and vegetables that would get me through the week. When I was done, my cart was completely full. I'm talking stacked high with everything from toilet paper to party decorations to enough food for a week. The total was going to be around $200, which was a lot for me, but I've been saving up for this shopping trip and my sister's visit. I wheeled my overflowing cart to the checkout line. There were only 2 lanes open since it was still early, but the lines weren't too bad. I picked the shorter one and started unloading my items onto the conveyor belt. The cashier was this friendly older guy who always worked Sunday mornings. He recognized me from my weekly visits. The cashier greeted me with a good morning and commented on how I was really stocking up today. I explained that my sister was visiting and I was throwing her a little party. He smiled and said that family visits were always special. I was about halfway through unloading when I felt someone tap me on the back. I turned around to see this middle-aged woman standing there with absolutely nothing in her hands. No cart, no basket, no items whatsoever. She was just staring at my cart with this annoyed expression. She told me she needed my cart. I blinked, confused. I figured she meant after I was done with it, so I said that was fine, but I was still using it. She shook her head and said no, she needed it right now. She claimed she was in a hurry and didn't have time to go find one because she was trying to catch up with something. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Half my groceries were still in the cart, and the other half were spread across the conveyor belt. I told her I was literally using it right now. She puffed out her chest and crossed her arms, like she was getting ready for a fight. She demanded that I take out my stuff and said I could just carry it or put it in baskets, since she only had a few things to get. I stood there speechless for a moment. The cashier had stopped scanning and was watching this whole interaction unfold. I could hear people in line behind me starting to murmur and shuffle impatiently. I told her no, I wasn't going to unpack $200 worth of groceries just because she didn't feel like walking 10 feet to get a cart. She started going off about how young people have no respect and how back in her day, people helped each other out instead of just thinking about themselves. I pointed out that there were carts right by the entrance and that she had literally walked past them to get here. She argued that she shouldn't have to walk all the way back there when there was a perfectly good cart right here that I was barely using anymore. The cashier finally spoke up and told her that I was in the middle of checking out and that there were carts available at the front of the store. She said something about how she couldn't believe how selfish everyone was these days and that no one wanted to help anymore. She shot me one last dirty look before storming off toward the front of the store. I watched her go, still trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. The cashier apologized for what happened and said some people just don't think. I told him it was okay, but that I couldn't believe she actually expected me to unpack everything. The cashier resumed scanning my items, but I was still rattled. The people behind me had witnessed the whole thing, and I felt embarrassed even though I hadn't done anything wrong. One of them, an older woman, leaned forward and told me I had handled that perfectly and that the other woman was way out of line. When I was paying for my groceries, I looked toward the front of the store. That's when I saw something that made my blood boil. The entitled woman was wheeling a cart, not just any cart, but one that had been sitting right by the entrance the entire time. She had walked past multiple available carts to come harass me for mine. I finished paying and started loading my bags back into my cart. When I was leaving, I passed her in the cereal aisle. She was casually shopping, taking her time, looking at different brands. So much for being in a hurry. Our eyes met for a second and I saw recognition flash across her face. She quickly looked away and pretended to be very interested in a box of cornflakes. I didn't say anything to her. I just smiled and continued on my way. The satisfaction of knowing she'd made a complete fool of herself was enough for me. My sister's party ended up being great. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.